I always enjoy talking about new technology, and I'm always happy to recommend the things that have worked for me and have grabbed my attention. So I often end up in conversations talking about new tech, and we reach the question, yeah, this sounds great, but how do I persuade my boss to let me use it? And that is a big part of the trick, right? It's all very well finding a great new solution with huge potential, but then there's the problem of having the time and the space and the internal support to actually try it out and use it. The best technology in the world remains useless if we're not allowed to adopt it. It's a horrible problem, it's a common problem, and its size, I think, varies with the size of the company. Adoption tends to be easier in startups, and it gets harder and harder as the company grows, as a company's habits become inertia, become the way we've always done things. And I've definitely seen some very large companies where change becomes an almost pathological problem. So, for all the discussions we've had about new technology, we have to have a discussion about change itself, about how you adopt new technology. And who better to ask about that than someone who works for a huge company getting new tech adopted? So my guest this week is Dov Katz, who works at Morgan Stanley. You may have heard of them. And he gets software practices to change and evolve in that huge company. And I grill him on this from as many angles as we can. How do you get management to buy into something new? How do you get other developers and other teams on board? Do you sometimes have to outsource the problem? If you're a software as a service business that has outsourced the problem and you know you can help, how do you get your foot back in the door? Is open source the answer? Is AI? And how do we get change done? How do we get new things done in those times when we're struggling to get anything done at all? I'm your host, Chris Jenkins. This is Developer Voices, and today's voice is Dov Katz. Dov Katz, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. We're going to find out what's in your brain. I'm going to start this unusually for me. I'm going to start on a cynical note, and it's going to be your job to give me some optimism.
Oh boy, and I'm usually the cynic, but okay.
Okay, well, we're going to have to try. So I've worked for a few different banks in my time. You work for Morgan Stanley right now, and when I first joined a bank working as a software developer, I thought the salary is fabulous. It must be because they've got lots of money and they want the best people. And towards the end of my time, I realized, yeah, they're paying a bit more for good people, but some of it's danger money. Some of it is just dealing with the fact that banks are impossible to get anything done in. And it's like compensation for... Do you think that's fair?
You think it was a disenjoyment premium or something like that?
Yeah.
I don't. Actually, I was speaking to a lot of people here, actually realizing that we all share such similar problems and challenges, and really doesn't matter. And these are large enterprises that aren't just banks. So I think historically, my belief is everybody's being paid competitively at the end, and you're paying for good talent, and there's really good problems to solve. Yes, you have to work in a different way, maybe a more disciplined way, in larger companies than you would at a startup, and maybe there's a premium to pay if you're looking for that talent that really just wants to stay in their startup environment, and they don't want to have the controls and the rigor of the discipline that comes with being in a large company. But I think overall the industry, people are being compensated fairly, and I don't think that in any way it's a disenjoyment premium. So I think, yeah.
But I'm being too cynical.
I think you're being too cynical, and I'm usually the cynic around. But
okay.
But there's a lot of stuff, especially we can talk about it. But that there's a lot of work that is not enjoyable. That you have to decide from an attitude perspective. Am I going to let this get me miserable? Or am I going to find creative ways to solve these problems and find a way to enjoy it? Like, the people who find a way to enjoy their job do a much better job than the people who just complain about it.
Yeah, I can totally believe that. But that's the thing. This is really where I want to get to, the creative solutions. Because I've found that working in these large companies, they're more like lots of small companies who are already overloaded. And I'm not going to name names, but I was working at an investment bank, and I found that any project you wanted to work on, if it involved another department, it was probably sunk because they didn't have time to take on a fraction of your project to help you get it over the line. Right? And so my question is, do you recognize the problem of getting anything new to happen in a large organization feels sometimes intractable? And do you have suggestions on how we can get things moving when everyone's already too busy anyway?
So when everyone's too busy, there's a question of prioritization. I think that the right new things do get the support they need to move forward. Not everything new needs to happen, just because it's new, right? So the right things, like if you're prioritizing, I don't know, to take today's theme, if you're prioritizing tech debt reduction and you've got certain things that you want to do that are going to help leadership show results in that area, they'll get prioritized even if they're new. They'll take a little bit longer. There's a rigor in the review process. You can't just bring in outside technology that may not be safe to run and just run it. But there's definitely there's a way to get things through. They need to be aligned with the strategy of technology or the strategy of the company. And if they are, then that's what's important. You set a strategy because you're defining what's important. And so things you're looking to introduce to the environment need to align with that.
Does that mean that either you need, if you're picking a new project to work on as someone in the middle of the organization, does that mean you either need to pick projects that align with what management are telling you they want, or you need to get good at telling management why this will make them happy?
There's a point. I mean, this is a very generic, but there's a point where you get together and discuss your strategy, and that's where the right people sit around the table deciding what's important. Obviously, if it's in the technology organization of a bigger business, this technology needs to support the business. This technology needs to support its mission as the business's mission to do its commercial purpose, whatever that might be. Right? It'll be different if you're a tech company and if you're a bank or healthcare or whatever. They've set that strategy, and now it's a question of the reason they do that is, my view, is those things drive decision making for everything else. So if you're able to connect everything you do back to the strategy, back to kind of a set of guiding principles, like, does this make sense? So let's go to very specific. Let's get back to the theme maybe of the conference, right? Yeah. If in your strategy you have a whole focus on being modern and evergreen and being able to move quickly, and that's become one of your technical principles, and that's become a pillar of your strategy, is maybe it's to attract talent, maybe it's to get new technology introduce the environment, which may be shackled behind some of this legacy tech debt that you can't get rid of. If you do that, that helps the whole process of, okay, we're going to prioritize things that help enhance that. We want to be measurably better at this later on, at the end of the year, at the end of the measurement period. Want to be better at this. You'll get people's attention if you're looking to improve something that the leadership has already said this is important to us. The investments they're going to make are going to be hopefully aligned to the things that they said are important to them. So investments that get made in technology and infrastructure are aligned to whatever the strategic themes are that they've declared. And so staying kind of close to that will help you introduce the right and important things to an organization.
Yeah, okay. So I'm getting a sense of where, but tell me specifically, right? So you've been talking at this conference about using OpenRewrite as a system of automated refactoring tools, right? How did it happen for you that you were trying to get that off the ground as a project at Morgan Stanley? They said, we want to modernize, and you go looking for something that will help you modernize, or? I've
been in the developer experience, developer tooling, developer experience space for quite a while. The introduction of OpenRewrite was almost an accident.
Okay.
We were talking with another company about another product that did something else for developers that we were interested in exploring, and that used OpenRewrite in its technology stack. And to help explain OpenRewrite, they introduced Jonathan to us, and we got a little bit of an overview of the framework. And seeing the potential of automating some of the tech debt remediation, and knowing the frustrations of our thousands of developers that are dealing with a constant and growing list of things that they need to do that are not their business requirements. They're these technology debt remediation things.
Yeah.
And I started to say to myself, we really need to explore what I called it at the time, like upgrade at scale. Like, what is the scaled approach to dealing with technical debt? Let's get a group of people together and start thinking about what could we do in this space that's fundamentally different than historical approaches to this, which is, managing a list of these challenges we want to do, making sure teams are tracking and burning that list down over the year. We want to take the highest priority items. We want to bring in outside help when we need it, find tools when we need it, and just you're constantly battling like the book of work you want to deliver for your business with this technical debt. So we started to really look at that and say, and so this accidental introduction of OpenRewrite had me down the path of what can we do with this thing? Let's try this out. What other tools are there? And let's start to like map out the landscape and see what's available to us, what would resonate with the developer community, what would they want to use, and do we want to start to make an investment thesis about this, something that we can put together, explore, evaluate, and go back to leadership and say, hey, this aligns completely with the strategy that we put forward. And when it's the time to be able to propose, let's go, bring a product in or go do something, we want to have the argument made. And then it's up to, is there budget and is it important enough, right? It's there should be nothing about the merits of the approach that is questioned at that point, right? So, but if there's no budget or it's not important enough relative to priorities, fine, because we're not doing it. But it doesn't mean it's the wrong thing to do. Like, my goal is like, let's see what's the best we could do with technology to solve this problem, and then we can decide as a group, or the leadership can decide as a group, is this worth investing in? Is it worth spending money and putting the budget, the cycles, the resources into it? Or are there other more important things to do, right? That's kind of where we decided to take it.
Does that mean your job is to find like potential improvements, or are you on the hook for go out and make it better?
No, so my main focus is driving developer productivity. We have a collection of teams that are subject matter experts in the various programming languages that are commonly used at the company. They build curated open source with some proprietary libraries, like stacks of libraries that the majority of production applications are built on top of. Between the libraries, the configurations, and things that were chosen, these are matching the architecture standards and the security, the security rules. They may be connected to internal data that's commonly used, whether it's company, HR or not HR, it was like a corporate directory. So like modeling that out, so everybody who uses people records have the same way of interacting with it, or standards in logging, standards in secure logging, whatever it is that we're doing. We provide those stacks across the different languages, and so that's my main focus. And obviously, our customers, the developers internally, are we need to keep them up to date on the latest versions of those stacks, and so we know the pain they're going through. As app devs, we're trying to make them always more productive and introducing commonly used features, maybe UI component libraries that everybody's building their UIs on, like that kind of stuff. So this is a common problem that people have around maintaining their code. Therefore, it's an obvious extension in my mind that we want to do anything we can to possibly make their lives easier. And seeing the potential of this tech, I made it a mission of mine to figure out if this is tech that needs to be introduced to the developers. Like, so we sit right next to, I guess, like the shared dev tooling team and the DevOps team. I used to be on the DevOps. I used to kind of lead the DevOps tool chains and things like that. Okay. I'd say I shifted left of DevOps because now I'm like doing development. I guess that's before DevOps even. Yeah. So I didn't think you could shift left of DevOps, but I did. So I'm we're all like a collectively responsible, I guess, for the developer productivity and the outcomes in the company. This fits somewhere, but for me, it was more important that its voice was heard than who owns it. If that makes sense. It wasn't like, oh, this is definitely my mandate, right? I don't know whose mandate it was. It just needed to be presented to the community and to see if it was something we wanted to do.
Give it a chance as a possible solution moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can see that. I think I'm going to allow myself one more cynical point.
Okay. You can be cynical the whole time. That's fine.
I'm going to try and get more optimistic as we go. I'm not normally this cynical. It's just I've got a bit jaded from working for certain banks, and it's like it sounds like. I mean, you could easily sit at a department like this and say, all I want to do is make sure all our projects are using Spring version X.Y or harder. And now I have to go and run a pilot and talk to management and convince them this is worth doing and talk to all the developers and get them on board. It seems like one of the problems with an organization that's so large is the thing you're trying to achieve seems so small and the knock-on effects are so large. Right? The number of different departments you need to talk to, the number of people you need to get interested, the amount of capacity you need to build. I guess I'm exasperated by that, but you see it as a role you can take on and like really sink your teeth into.
If I tell you I'm responsible for the productivity, or elements of the productivity of 15 to 20,000 developers, this easily is something that will keep me up at night. If the reason they're not productive is they're working on manually fixing tech debt instead of something that can make enhance the business, right? If they're competing priorities there, so I easily see my role there. Number two, I'd say that us as providers of curated stacks, including, by the way, internally developed APIs that are designed to connect with firms' infrastructure, we have challenges of getting people to upgrade on the latest versions of APIs that we produce, and we ourselves, as library creators, would want to provide an easier upgrade path for them. So creating OpenRewrite recipes that correspond with our own changes to our own libraries. And I think that's a use case in and of itself, where we might become the delivery mechanism for a lot of the language-specific recipes that would go into a marketplace like this.
Yeah. Okay.
And therefore, it's very much core to my mission. I mentioned it earlier at the conference. Technical debt remediation is probably one of the most demoralizing. This goes back to your cynicism. Is the most demoralizing, underappreciated, under-rewarded discipline in the software. In the kind of software development lifecycle. It's just people, neglect it. They don't like it. They don't like being told to do it. And then, maybe there's a disenjoyment premium to pay for people who do that.
Yeah.
My goal is to kind of let technology change that narrative a little bit and make it fun, because you can see yourself doing this and it affecting lots of code at a time. But also just there's new ways to do it now, and we need to change our attitude towards it. Do I think, this is the real question, is will this help us now do a targeted push and just get farther along on that curve of evergreen or whatever? Or is this going to fundamentally change the equation so never again will we fall behind? That's a question I don't know the answer to. I kind of hope that we end up all the way where we're now in this self-healing environment of just always staying up to date. But people have been talking about that forever. It's, you do a push, and at some point, you're on to another thing, and some stuff falls behind. So I think hopefully we get to a place where the library creators who make a breaking change will produce an OpenRewrite recipe or some other technology to get people off. You see it with code mods in JavaScript, and you see it with some of those. It would be great for everyone who has their stuff consumed to give you a solution instead of a problem when they have to get you upgraded to the latest version. It's too hard now.
Yeah. I've seen this in some small fledgling languages, I'm going to say Gleam and Elm's done it, where a new version ships and it comes with a tool that will rewrite your old code. Right? Mm-hmm. There is some hope that we could take what we do all the time, take something boring and rote and teach a computer to do it for us so we don't have to worry. Mm-hmm. But okay, so let's get into specific strategies then you've seen to deal with long-term technical debt. And we have to start with the host of the conference, OpenRewrite.
Yes.
So we've done a podcast on this already with Jonathan. Mm-hmm. But we talked about abstract syntax trees and things like that. But from a kind of higher level thing, what are you actually using it to do? Is it just simple stuff like upgrading Spring libraries, or how ambitious are you being with it?
So it's not simple. It's not only that. So obviously within the marketplace, there's 3,000 recipes, and there's no way for us to know exactly what to use what on what. But we're taking the tens of thousands of repos that we're exposing to the platform, and we are trying a bunch of things out, whether it's Terraform, applying best practices to certain infrastructure that we have. I think there's a whole opportunity for that really with the non-Java languages too. The JavaScript's coming, C#'s coming, Python's coming. But on the Java side, we have combinations of people using the out-of-the-box recipes and just let's get the stuff that's been on our to-do list for a really long time done. And then there's people with there are people writing custom recipes. We've built a an inner source repository where developers are able to contribute their approach to somebody's doing specific application frameworks that are internally developed. They're doing exactly that vision of like writing the upgrade path for people and publishing it into the marketplace. And we have other cases where we're trying to switch build tools. We have a legacy Java build tool. We'd like everyone to move to kind of the latest versions of Gradle and whatever, and we want people to do that. It's historically been like dreaded by developers. It's a really big change to the way they work. Can we create a recipe that would automate that? So we've spent a lot of time working on that, and that's been actually one of the most popular recipes we have. A couple thousand repos that need to move over.
Is there enough consistency? Because you've got like tens of thousands of repos. Is there enough consistency of these problems that you can identify a large class of things like that and automate it away?
There is. I think that the trend is certainly to consolidate repos also. So at some point there's, the desire is to have way fewer number of repos than we have. Obviously there's a lot of like code that could be retired, projects that are naturally consolidating into platforms and things like that. But yeah, there's tons. When you're dealing with numbers like that, you find, a significant amount of just about anything. When you have like diverse sets of business problems being solved by the organization, you're able to find, enough of really impactful things to do, starting, with their core Java support and then moving on to some of these other languages as they become available. There's plenty to do, and my goal is really make sure that the leadership sees the size of the problem with the plenty to do thing, and then make sure that the actual people doing the changes are the developers and the architects in very local areas of the org. So I might run some analysis to say, hey, there's like 25,000 hours of recoverable capacity to give back to the dev teams if we automate this work. But I would expect that work would not be done by a central team. It needs to be done by the developers. And then when you get down to that, the numbers are much smaller. This team might have 500 hours of recoverable capacity. This one might have less. You really need them to own the problem. You can't just let some central team solve it for everybody. So my goal is get them the tools that would make them the most productive, but get them excited about using the tools so they go do it.
How do you do that? Because you're talking to management and you're talking to developers, and those are two different audiences you need to get on board.
You need to do both, right? You need to do both in parallel. You need to have developers, banging on the door to get their hands on the tool while you're working with leadership to make sure they understand the value the tool can offer. And so we have an excellent network internally of kind of change agents who are eager to. Everyone wants, like from a developer perspective, everyone sees the pain. They want to solve this problem in a fundamentally different way. And so we're working with them to. Their enthusiasm is infectious, and we're working with them to make sure that they have access to the tools and they have access to materials that can help present. I was doing some presentations, and now there's other people doing the presentations in different regions. They're very motivated to try it out. And while that's going on, working with leadership to say, let's set the bar for what the hypothesis we're looking to test is. Like, what would need to be successful for us to say this is worth us spending some money to work on next year? Or do we want to continue, or it's really good idea, but we don't have the budget or we don't have the prioritization. So keep it in the back burner and just continue doing as much as you can the other way, right? Those are let's say the two options. And then developers are asking their leadership. When you speak with kind of the leadership circles in the different departments, you're able to share the potential here. You want that to you want to create a lot of awareness. So at the end, it's not just like whatever the product is, right? It's not a question of you don't want to be like, okay, we want to bring this in next year and have people like, what's that? Like, you want people like, oh, for sure, right? You want them to fully be aware of the value, and be willing to use it.
Right. Yeah. So you are. I think that one of the skills you have there, which doesn't come naturally to geeks like me, is you are actively thinking about selling the idea to different audiences, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to use the word selling.
Yeah,
you are trying to get someone to adopt an idea.
Because I'm a central function, the ability to, the money is centrally funded from the entire organization. And for the most part, we have a very clear mandate of the, let's say, the toolkits, the stacks that we're helping supply to the organizations and all of that. When there is a big thing we want to do new, it needs to go through the right process to get investment dollars allocated to it. And because we are in the central team, we tend to do things centrally. So you must be out there creating awareness. We're not doing a tiny thing for a tiny project off to the side. That doesn't scale very well as a central team. So in order to do things, we have to think big when we do it.
Do you find that you are almost another startup within Morgan Stanley, like whose job is to, as you see with like companies around it, your job is to kind of go to internal conferences and pitch your ideas to people?
I can tell you, I saw the word somewhere, intrapreneurship. I don't know, but I think it's fun to be able to. It's fun to see people get excited about something that you're excited about in general. Like, so if I'm excited about something, get other people excited about it. It's validating that it's a problem. It hits a pain point. It's not my day job, but I guess anything related to developer productivity could be my day job. So. Yes, I have to do it. I think in certain cases, I've had this happen a few times in my career. Something really important doesn't have the voice it needs, and therefore it just won't get done. It's not because it doesn't have the right voice it needs. It doesn't have the right champion behind it. So it's not getting the awareness it needs to get. It's not getting the support it needs to get. I felt this one was super important because it fundamentally addresses a problem that the old way of addressing is not compatible with the growth of the problem and the new tools that are out there. I felt like this had to be at least give it our best shot of getting people aware. I don't know where it would lead us. I don't know if it would mean I would need to increase the size of the organization so we have people dedicated to supporting it. Because that's just like consequences. I don't care if it lives somewhere else. I just think as developers, and I'm as a former developer, like, I want this thing to help my own code. So I imagine everybody else wants it too, and it just becomes kind of like that. So I do when I do my travel, I tend to have like a couple of like roadshow topics that I speak to, and it's either career advice for early career developers, and occasionally there's some big topic that's like on my mind and becomes something. And this is currently what I've been doing over the last year as we've been trying it out. Look, we tried it out. Look, it changed code. I will pick people from the audience and ask them like what department they're in, and pull up their code, and run something that points out a fixable opportunity in their code, and just do a pull request for fun from the room. I'm sure they decline it, but like some have approved it. Like simple fixes, just to say it's that easy. Go see if there's stuff on your list of tech remediation that we can get out of the way. Like, that shouldn't dominate your backlog.
Yeah. This I definitely get that feeling like you found a great idea and you don't think enough people know about it. Yeah. And it's just like the burning drive to stick the idea
so
out.
It's fun. It definitely feels entrepreneurial at times.
Yeah.
And I think it's important. I don't think it's limited to any one person. I think anybody could do that with anything. It's you find something really amazing. You want to show it to other people, and you want them to, It's not in my job mandate to do it. I've done it a bunch of times in my career over various different things. It's led me down the DevOps pathway back when. So it just becomes a feature, like a side thing. I have my day job, then I have whatever the side thing is that's also occupying some of my time, which is interesting.
Yeah. I do sometimes think that in order to succeed in a large system, in any large system, you have to make space to do something different, but you also have to get a certain joy from saying, this isn't really my job officially, but this is something that will change.
It's like almost more fun when it's not your official.
Yeah.
Then you get the project, then you're on the hook for delivering it, and then it is your job. So it's like,
and then there are stakes.
No, but it's fine. It's important, and if there's someone else that wants it and wants the exposure and the career growth, great. By all means. But it's not going to die on the vine because no one's advocating for it. At least just whatever the idea is, people should have the ability to go out, and hopefully they have some sort of captive audience that they can share it with, and it's been effective historically for me.
Yeah, I can see
and for many others in the company. So.
What do you think of, because I know some companies that their way of dealing with tech debt is to just say, okay, I'm thinking of Jeff Bezos here, right? Everyone has to upgrade to this version by this date or you're fired.
Yeah. Right. That'd be great. But it's
you'd approve of that, okay.
But if they have to, let's say they pick like a mandate, like you have a specific thing to do. We have that all the time. Like if there's some really important thing that has to be done, it's done. Period. And there's no negotiating out of it if it's important enough for whatever the reasoning. However, do you want to do it by hand or do you want to do it in an automated fashion? Becomes the question. People obviously pushing back. They had releases they wanted to do. They had software features they wanted to add for the business, and now there's some really strong mandate for some really usually a very valid reason why this is now the more important thing to do. So fine. So get them the fastest possible way to do it. So that and that's where you want to find new technology. Telling a bunch of people to go back to their keyboards and kind of battle through it isn't necessarily the most efficient use of everyone's resources and skill. If there are new technologies to help you with that. And so, my mission through this process was to find the new technologies that I think would be most useful and help expose the developer community. And we're still on the journey, right? But I think that it seems to have struck a chord with developers, and it seems to be showing itself to be valuable to help with a lot of the bigger problems that people wanted to do. So now I'll tell them, wait, do it this way. It might be easier, at least get you 80% of the way there, so your work is the last 20%.
Yeah. I personally lean towards that kind of deterministic sort of system, and I can definitely see how, at the scale of something like a big bank, Morgan Stanley, the problems that come up repeatedly are large enough that you will see patterns and you can automate them away. But I want to get your opinion on the other side of the determinism spectrum that everyone's talking about right now, which is just make AI do it.
Yes.
Where do you stand on that?
Definitely the other side of the determinism spectrum. I think AI is brilliant. There's some really amazing things that it's doing for developers, and we're seeing it everywhere. The amazing tools that are coming out, some of which many big organizations already have their hands on. I think when you look at doing things at a small scale, AI is great. And so I find that, like, let's go back to like refactoring code. Refactoring code tends to be a very deterministic operation. If you're looking to do specific things to a tree that you compiled, you can do that with a very deterministic way. OpenRewrite is a great example of that. And AI can't do that with the same level of accuracy, and it's doing it on much more expensive compute. So there's a place for AI, but what I would want is AI to determine what to do in the code, what to change, what recipes to run, and then use the recipe runs that take place separately. So a lot of my initial journey was just rationalizing the tool space, like what is out there to do what. So when you talk to leadership and you're saying, we need to get this new generation of tooling in place to help us tackle our tech debt, there's going to be AI in that, and there's going to be non-AI in that. And it's important that people understand what to use for what. It's not, AI is the hammer and every problem looks like the nail, right? AI is great with maybe estimating your story points or your capacity that you need to do development based on the requirements. AI is great for helping you better articulate the architecture decisions you're making. It's great for checking another pair of eyes, so to speak, to check your code reviews and that the code changes don't raise any alarm bells to what you'd want to do. It's not necessarily a substitute for humans on that, but it's another, should always just have that in the loop too and see if any insight comes out. It's good at reimagining code bases. So if you want to completely deconstruct your code base into its requirements and then re-implement it a different way, we have an internal message bus thing that we wanted to replace with Spring integrations or Apache Camel or something else.
Yeah.
And it's great at deconstructing what you're doing and then give you the first stop of how would you reapply that in a different framework. It's really good with that. But
Done that?
Yeah, we've done that.
Okay.
We did it. We actually did it with AI, and we then converted what we found that we needed to do into an OpenRewrite recipe. So the creative process, it's super helpful, but the repetitive process is when you start saying, hey, let's mechanize this. Make it deterministic. So I used to divide up the tooling into things that scale very well at very large scale. There are things that are deterministic and they run on very cheap compute, to things that don't scale necessarily well but are extremely valuable, and they are less deterministic. They're somewhere in the deterministic spectrum. I like that term, and they run on very expensive compute. And together, you'll need a combination of those tools to tackle what we'll call like the optimization of your SDLC, not even just tech debt, right? You'll need that collection of tools. And so it's very important that when leadership gets a pitch, that they aren't being confused by the most shiny tool in the toolbox, and that it's going to do everything. Like, I'll be the first to tell you, like, OpenRewrite is not going to convert your Perl code into Python. AI can get you some of the way there. But you don't need AI to migrate, let's say a version of X to Y of some library, because OpenRewrite could do that. So there's it's necessary to view the arsenal of tools you need and have some sort of like combination in your head. And when you go ask for investment, you need to be aware of that like duality of that everything existing together, because at the end, they're not looking for an investment in a tool. They're looking for like an investment in solving the problem, and that's going to be a combination of things.
Yeah. Do you find that you must find some people are more enthusiastic about one than the other? Do you try? I mean, do you try and corral them on that side and find some?
I think there's a lot of people that have done great things, with AI, both internally developed and like off-the-shelf solutions, who are less familiar with maybe the OpenRewrite ecosystem. And there's a lot of people with OpenRewrite who think it solves everything out there, and therefore maybe aren't aware that some would be best. My goal has always been, and even though I obviously launched an effort to get us the OpenRewrite ecosystem brought in, my goal is to make sure to never talk about this as like this is the mission. The mission is, here's the whole landscape. I always want to see the kind of slide that is inclusive of both categories of problem solving, so that everybody can make up their own mind. But certainly don't confuse A for B, because that's what you saw first.
Yeah,
like that's the worst. It'd take you 10 times as long, and then all this automation benefit, you're wasting time because you're using the wrong tool. So
you've got to keep your eye on the broader context.
Yeah, and you have to make sure that the community who receives the marketing and the sales, as you put it, is aware of the broader context. So they're not just enamored by the better presenter of the better tool that day. They need to know what to use. And one of the things kind of large companies tend to have is a governance process for tracking this tech debt, whatever the process is. And there's they keep track of, like, here are the big programs of work that we need to do. We want to eradicate these old versions of runtimes. We want to move these versions of like the OS. We want to move off of these versions of database. Whatever that list looks like, the real cultural change is the people who are accepting into that list, because those lists get reported to management and to the application owners, like your apps are falling behind on whatever our targets are for this, all that tech debt, right? The people receiving that list should not take any new items onto that list unless there's a clear automation opportunity being presented along with it. So if someone says, hey, product X, we believe we want to stop using in the company. So you need to find an alternative, and you need to, here are the projects we identified using project X. We want to take that out.
Yeah.
So if that happens, usually the governance group will take that, they'll add it to their list, and they'll start notifying app owners, some new work has been added to your plate, that's this mandatory work.
Yeah.
Whatever the process will differ by organization.
Yeah.
But those people should reject it unless there's a clear automation strategy on there. And for them to have that automation strategy, they need to see the full landscape of tools to know what they should be thinking about when they try to automate. If they only know about, OpenRewrite, or they only know about AI, then their thinking through the automation is going to be flawed. They're not going to know enough about what's out there. So you really want the community to be aware of the tools, because part of their productivity comes from choosing the right tool at the right time.
Yeah. It's kind of almost hints at a new kind of software role, almost, because we're so busy building the thing we're trying to build. There's a kind of change management component to software, which is in itself a discipline of knowing the tool set, knowing the techniques.
Yeah.
We all have a bit of that as programmers, but
it's like an intuition that we need to make sure that the developers have. They need to know, when to play around with the code assist tool and when to, not, because it's just going to give you the wrong answers every time.
Yeah.
I mean, I was actually playing around once. I have some open source project that I'm a maintainer on that we released, And I got to a point where I needed to, you keep getting these updates, there's some vulnerability, you have to update something in the Node.js ecosystem, some JavaScript. And like every time I would try to start, I would end up in some dependency hell that the combination of things that resulted were not going to do it.
Right, yeah.
And I kept going to a code assist tool in my ID, and I'm like, and this was at home, how do I fix that? And it would give me some other advice, and it would just still fail over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the hell with that. I'm going to go to ChatGPT, again, on my home computer, for like an outside project. I'm going to ChatGPT. I'm going to give it my entire like package JSON. I'm like, this is the JSON file, and these are the errors. And it came back and just gave me a correct combination of dependencies. And it's like sometimes the best tools, just go to the raw AI did it for me better than all the tools that I was trying out before.
I'm genuinely surprised by that.
It was frustrating because I would spend like every Sunday morning, like after coffee, I'd have a little bit of time to myself. I would say, maybe this is the weekend I'm going to try and get this thing upgraded. And then I would get to this point where it's like, okay, get to the same dependency hell. I ran out of, like, life caught up. I didn't have that much time. But so finally I tried this approach because I'm basically desperate to not spend a lot of time on this problem. And that's the one that worked for me. So I'm like,
that really surprises me that you got an accurate answer rather than an answer that looked the right shape.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. But yeah, so it got me over the impasse. So if you ever stuck, and it worked for me for what I needed to do. So I just moved on. But it's another thing when you're really desperate to try. But it's a combination of tools. So
sometimes I found this with parenting. Actually, the worst problem you can have is to run out of options to try.
Yes, I don't even go into parenting.
Yeah. We don't cover the
definitely. Definitely. Yeah, let's stick to the easy stuff like tech debt. Yeah.
Okay, so let's turn the spectrum into a triangle.
Okay.
Because there was one more point you made that seemed like another approach to this generally, which must come into the picture somewhere. Which is you were talking in your talk about having centralized platform teams and a way of dealing with versioning to say, okay, for some infrastructure stuff, we will have a dedicated team and you use them, and then the problem becomes they can upgrade one or two repos manually.
Yeah.
I'm getting a sense you're going to say that is another piece of the puzzle. Where do you think it shines, and where do you think you want to go to deterministic or Gen AI type solutions?
Well, there's two things. So if you have a central platform team and their job is to produce a singular stack and everybody has to be on it, you potentially can be in a very good place in terms of staying up to date because they're maintaining it and they're preventing you from consuming their older versions and all that. It becomes a very opinionated stack, so people, depending how uniform your business problems are, sometimes it's not business problem specific, but if it is, then you probably can't do one opinionated stack for everything you're doing. But if it's fairly generic stuff, then you can, and then you will solve your tech debt problem because it's only in one place. Like a giant monorepo with a single choke point to these dependencies will give you a better outcome for the thousands of developers working on that giant monorepo. That's great, but that's not achievable for everyone all the time. So I'm not sure if you meant that kind of central team, or you mean a central team that's going to do the upgrades for people.
No, I'm thinking
for even there are thousands of repositories.
If you find, you're looking at this pattern of 20,000 repos, and you see that 12,000 of them use Postgres.
Right. Okay. So that's central team. If there are a lot of companies that offer the services, and there are a lot of companies who hire the services, where they'll be, you get some consultancy in who's going to look at a problem like that. Let's say tens of thousands of repos, and this 1,000 or 2 require an upgrade from let's pick a simple example. You have a database version that needs to change. There's a driver involved. There's some SQL dialect changes. There might be some Java API changes associated with the driver change. I'm making up an example, right? And you can either have all your talented developers stopping the world to go work on that, or you can hire an outside company that's just going to go get access to the projects and polish up. This is pre-AI, right? They'll go get the project, they'll polish up a pull request, send it in, and that's the service, right?
Yeah.
And historically, I've heard it described as an upgrade factory. That's the term that gets used. And that was great because it certainly limited your developers' brainwaves on these kind of simple commodity problems. But it doesn't scale because there's the no end to the number of problems, and developers would never take ownership and responsibility for their code if someone's going to come and clean it up for them all the time. I like to refer to that as the F word, the factory. And I think that anyone who has a factory clearly has the kind of budget they need to look at some of the new generation of tooling, because that's the budget you'd use. So to the extent that's possible, it won't be possible with everything for sure, but that's a good place to start looking for budget for investing in tech tools. But you will need developers motivated, just like you'll need developers motivated to merge in those pull requests. You'll need developers motivated to use these new tools. So, but I definitely central teams, they've been helpful. If you are on a tight deadline and everyone is too focused on something else, I'm not going to discount it completely. I think longer term, there are technologies which should take the place of most factories so that they're only really used where you have to have a human doing some very sensitive work or whatever it is, and we just can't find a way to automate it. Then go do it. But the default should be, can this technology automate this problem? And then you go back to that. Right now, we're in that transition phase. There's people still doing it. This technology maybe not rolled out or not mature enough for every problem in the world. But over time, I think that a lot of that kind of hiring humans to do repetitive tasks goes away either by AI or by like massive rescale, upgrading at scale kind of tech.
I always think as programmers, our job isn't to do work; it's to teach a machine to do work.
Exactly.
Yeah. Hey, so you're hinting on, you're bordering on something I've often seen and I've wondered and I want to talk to you about, which is I have seen banks where they want a new initiative and they just can't get it done. And they've got the budget for it, but they can't make it happen because of internal problems. And what ends up happening is 2 or 3 guys who work at the bank quit their job, get a contract with the bank to build it independently as a startup, and then sell a license back to the bank. And that actually works.
Yep.
That approach works because it just clears away all the admin debt.
Right.
So let's start by asking what you think of the bud-off approach to software development.
I think it's clearly happened over the years, like in the industry, and not in any specific industry. I'm sure it's happened everywhere where there's friction to doing something.
And like a sufficiently large company.
But again, what you really see is passionate individuals who see a real problem as an opportunity to fix it, and they think it's probably an opportunity to fix it in more than one place than where they're working, and they start a job. They start to go develop that idea and solicit investment. Sometimes it's welcome investment sponsored by the place they left. But I think there's nothing wrong with it. It happens. I don't think it's, large companies with billions of dollars of tech budget have like real responsibilities to govern that budget and be, maybe it doesn't move at the pace of a startup. So sometimes it's just easier to innovate without some of those limitations. But I think a lot of the companies are getting much better at, supporting innovation from within. There are like sandboxed ways to do it that are safer for, that they don't break any of their own kind of concerns around security. But this still happens. My opinion, there's many times like casually we've had a conversation about something. It's like, it'd be so cool if we went and started company X that did this because it's so hard to find the right solution or whatever. But it's nothing wrong with it. Kudos to people who make it happen.
Okay.
I think there's it's completely okay to have that take place from time to time. For companies to benefit without necessarily, like internal things. I was trying to think if there's any kind of analogy I can create to that. But I feel like you want to have unfettered access to create a product outside of your customer, because once you sell it to your customer, you're kind of doomed into supporting it the way your customer is using it.
Yeah.
I think that freedom is very important to give to the innovating community, and be able to do it outside of it is fine.
Okay. Yeah. There's a business model there. Yeah. Well, we can tie from that into another business model, because what often happens with those sorts of teams is they branch off from a bank, leaving with a contract to sell back to the bank. It works. They start selling to other companies, and before you know it, you've got a thriving software as a service business, right? But you also get and the nice thing about that is they get a kind of built-in first customer sales contract before they make the leap. But you also get people building software as a service things, trying to sell it to companies like yours.
Yep.
And for the sake of the people who are doing that and the people who might one day start those kinds of companies, as a representative of one of these giant organizations that has the budget, if I'm building a software as a service thing that I think you might like, and I look at your sales pipeline, which is at least 18 months, what should I be doing to try and get in your doors?
I could tell you I could tell you some things anecdotally from talking to colleagues, peers in the industry, and they probably apply to most large companies, I would hope, that have like a rigor around kind of supply chain management. They would probably apply to companies that have regulated industries, but it's very generic. The types of things. So first of all, I think that the products need to be like enterprise ready, and by that I mean like the architecture needs to. You're going to have a lot of things that security is going to want to look at around the sensitivity of the data, around how does it connect to the internet if it's going to the public internet and it's a SaaS product. Is it encrypting the data in transit? Is it leaving a lot of data out there? What's the process that's being what's the process that happens for the connectivity between what you have and what they need external to your doors. Right, so there's definitely an element of that. I'd say that there's a need for good, robust administrative roles, like the whole like role-based access control. It tends to be very primitive when it's first built. A lot of companies and some enterprise first companies get that right earlier in the stage, but a lot of products, not just SaaS, but like in general, there's like I don't know. It's usually like admin true false. And that's it. And they have like a tremendous amount of rights, and in certainly in large regulated places, there tends to be this principle of least access. We want to give people as little access to any features as you possibly can, because they shouldn't have over provisioned access. And what that's caused in a lot of places, I wanted to open source some stuff around it also, but like people are shutting off admin access to the tool and building wrappers around the whole tool, like when it comes to privileged activities, because they need more flexible admin access granted subjectively for certain things. So if you're, it's with all the developer tooling, that people have to do that, and then they're building self-service portals to give to developers, and before they operate some task on behalf of the developer, they enforce their own logic around what the developer can and cannot do into what project or not. So, but getting that right is very important. So speaking with a design partner that understands the organization, the layers of access, organizational awareness in general. Like someone will come with a reporting tool, and the reporting tool will be, it'll show you kind of like your individual project, and then it will show you all the projects. But usually you need a cascading, like concentric circles of different parts of the org that would want to see a report relative, they'd want to see things differently, and making sure the reporting function is robust enough, because it's about that right manager seeing the value the product gives, and it's not always the person in the cockpit of the whole organization needs to see that big view, and then down to the individual, let's say developer. There's all these steps in between. So getting a organizational literacy built into your reporting is very important, because that's what sells the product. And so a lot of times you get very primitive reporting functions, but that may make it more difficult for the internal champion of a product to go pitch it to their management, because they can't see how it would look, for that org or for this person who's influential and needs to be able to see it. So there's a lot of things like that come up.
I think that'd be very hard for someone to understand unless they've worked in a large organization and seen all the constraints and then gone off to do the entrepreneurial thing.
Yeah, I'd say they definitely would benefit from some insider knowledge on that. And I also think that this is where, if the product has a decent amount of merit, and there are incubators or like places and labs in these companies that can try it out, getting a design partner would go a long way. Sometimes it's okay to not know, but it's having the design partner means that the right person, the company can help shape the product. And so that's another way to get around it. Without just coming with a finished product that doesn't hit the mark on certain organizations, it might just make the sales process more difficult.
Yeah. Because I think, especially, I've been largely a small company indie kind of developer for most of my career, and the idea of taking something I've built that I love and turning it into enterprise software, it does give me pause emotionally.
It's a tall order, but I don't think that it's the antithesis of what a small company needs. I think it's just more rigor in the design, and like whether it's the level of recoverability needed for a big enterprise to say we're going to rely on this thing. It needs to be. I need a tighter like service level obligation than you might give, or whether, for example, another one that comes up very frequently is, I can I'll give you like a sealed container and you'll run that in your environment. Sometimes it's so complicated that that's the black box you kind of want it, and other times I'd rather just be able to get the jar file and run that, and then containerize it myself, because there's too many nuances to our environment that aren't quite the black box isn't helpful. So being flexible about that stuff makes a huge difference also. Just some things assume you can run everything as root. Like no controlled environment lets everything run as root.
Yeah, you're not going to sell that into a bank.
But it's so common, and like you're doing the sales cycle and you're working with an enterprise, and like once you hit a roadblock like that, it's a month or two of getting it on someone's product roadmap, getting it approved, getting security to sign off that it's been done correctly. That's like an extra 4 months of time just because like no one thought that. So again, it goes back to the principle of least access. If you don't need something to run as root, make it not run as root. If you don't need something, don't just do it because it's easier, or you'll alienate a whole audience that for them it's extremely important that these privileged accesses aren't granted to outside software or whatever. I'm making up some of the examples, but this is very common. Or for example, if you need to provide config options, make sure you're being flexible about the design of that. Are they coming in environment variables, flat files, databases, whatever you need to do? Don't only give one option. You never know when someone has a different way that they manage those configs through their infrastructure management. They want to send it in a certain way.
Yeah.
The more flexible you are, I think the better designed your product is, and it also is more inclusive to some of the more restricted environments it might need to run.
Yeah. The theme that runs through all the things you've been saying here is management, developers, large organizations you're selling to. You've got to understand your target audience.
Yeah, and to understand the disciplines that are important to them, that they adopt, adopt those disciplines. You'll understand your customer better, where that's a possibility, where that's appropriate. Right?
Yeah. Okay. There's one last piece to your huge suitcase full of ideas, which is we've talked about like selling stuff. The antithesis of that, the other end of that spectrum, is just giving it away free. You've been doing a lot of stuff with Finos, which is an open source organization for financial software, right? I understand the acronym and the headline, but tell me more. Like what is it? What is it actually?
So Finos is the FinTech Open Source Foundation. It is part of the Linux Foundation. Okay. It emerged in, I want to say, 2000 and I can't go back to the dates, probably 2015, 2016. It can't be 10 years old yet, unless I'm just, that's scary if it is. But at some point, there was a desire by some financial services to launch a communications platform that one of the banks had built. And in that process, they decided that they were going to put the source code in kind of like an open source place so that no bank that wanted to use that would feel unfairly disadvantaged because they didn't have the code.
Okay.
And that became like the first the first recent cross financial services open source foundation. Over time, that grew to be a general purpose open source foundation. It was originally around banks creating plugins for the messaging system. It grew into a much more general purpose one where any of the financial services companies and their vendors and their partners and regulators, whatever, were able to collaborate on common problems in an approved way. So it totally changed the attitude associated with financial services and open source. There was stuff going on, but this became a very big force amongst the industry to be able to mutualize some of the challenges that they had and work on them together. Things that were not forms of competitive advantage. So it could be anything. These are like anything from I've got a visualization framework I'd love to open source, other people can use it. Maybe it's specific to financial services, it's a high density display, very, very like the trading screens. Okay. Maybe it's a framework that can control how you commit things to GitHub so that they are going through whatever the bank's restrictions are. It's like a special proxy for that. There are other ones that translate data between multiple data models. There's some building that are kind of like a common domain model around the financial concepts that the regulations like to reference so that you can normalize the data. It's a bunch of things, right? Things that aren't sources of competitive advantage and better worked on together. Another one, for example, is the controls you would apply to your cloud infrastructure. Just what is the financial services like they tend to want? You can open source the tooling around enforcing those controls and applying them. I think it's a great thing to have the ability to do that. There's a new one on AI now that they're working on some things together. A lot of that AI is like, should we agree on some common guardrails and maybe mutualize that together as a group rather than each of the institutions evolving that on their own. The list goes on. There's a lot of things, and it's a great organization where just people can work collaboratively across organizational boundaries that has never really been possible.
Now, what makes that possible? Because I would have thought getting banks to talk to each other openly is not only hard, but there's someone else in the bank saying, no, don't go and talk about this openly.
I think leadership has embraced the fact that just how much open source is already used within these companies, and some things are better supported if you can contribute back. So already, companies using big open source projects would want to contribute back to the community changes that they have. Otherwise, they're maintaining a fork of something. There's probably projects over the years that have had heavy financial services consumption that died in the public because nobody ever contributed back because it was not allowed. Right? Yeah. And they're probably good ideas that just died over the years because the heavy active community was secretive and it wasn't allowed to.
It's a tragedy for something.
It's a big tragedy, yeah. But I think to have this happen is really great because it allows for institutions to give back. It allows for, let's say, some sort of regulator wants to do something a certain way, and this allows institutions to collaborate on how they implement things like that are now possible. And I think that over what started with this messaging platform has moved on to other things. The value kind of proved itself. So what started as, let's say, myself and my organization and peers and other organizations kind of like injecting the gravitas of open source into the narrative, into the conversation. You now go on these more senior calls and it will come up by itself. And that's how it's become relevant and important. And there's tons of articles you can read about. There's the financial services kind of sea change relationship with open source in the last couple of years. Recently, I think this year there was one I think I did with Business Insider, a couple of them, and it really just it's a breath of fresh air into the industry, and it's great to see it thriving like it is.
It does sound very healthy. Yeah. Perhaps the last question then, specifically, what do you do to make that happen? Because I'm guessing you could be cutting code, but you're probably not.
Well, one of the things I contributed needed that upgrade, so I was doing the ChatGPT thing for it. But in general, there's a board governance structure, and we're helping shape the direction of the foundation. It has over 100 members, and we're very involved in helping really understand what's its mission at this size. What's the mission for this foundation? What are the challenges we want to solve? What started off as let's collaborate on the open source readiness, maturity of individual companies that were members. Maturity is like a given, but maybe AI adoption governance as a maturity is the next thing. So now they're looking at creating a separate work stream focused just on AI at an industry level. I'm interested in thinking about, well, maybe we take some of our tech debt remediation, which is certainly a commodity problem. Yeah. Everyone's stuck with it. I envision a year from now, we can be having financial institutions collaborating on whether it's OpenRewrite recipes or on other technology to help each other stay current. That can happen out in the open with a foundation that gives us a fair and protected and safe place for us to collaborate with each other. Yeah. These aren't problems that we should be solving on our own. And so I see a lot of opportunities that are coming out of that, but it's really advocating for that. There's events that they have twice a year where really all the technologists from the industry get together, and the partners and the vendors, and it's a great thing to see thrive from having started it, been involved with this since its inception. So it's an
almost terrifying decade.
Yeah, it's nice that they have a vertical just for financial services, and it's really cool to see it.
I mean, it makes sense. It's such a huge part of the software world.
Yeah.
So I get the sense that your job is almost entirely building bridges to places I would find hard to build bridges to.
It's entirely fun, I can tell you that.
Thank you for building a bridge to me for an hour, and thanks.
Thanks so much. It was great talking with you.
Yes.
Cheers.
Thank you, Dov. That episode was recorded live at a conference called Code Remix earlier in the year. So I just want to say thank you to the organisers, Modern, for inviting me and giving me some space to record podcasts with their interesting speakers. Modern have been big supporters of this podcast ever since I opened the doors on Patreon, so thank you over there. As ever, you'll find links from today's conversation in the show notes, as well as links to Patreon if you'd also like to become a supporter. And if you want to support us in an easier, quicker way, please take a moment to click like and subscribe and maybe share this episode with a friend. And we'll be back soon with another interesting developer's voice. So until then, I've been your host, Chris Jenkins. This has been Developer Voices with Dov Katz. Thanks for listening.